It's a unique setting for SU football as they head all the way over to the Bay Area for a meeting with Cal. After dropping their last game to Boston College, it's on the Orange to bounce back and adjust to the travel quickly. Can Kyle McCord and company find some consistency against a stout Cal defense? Can the Orange run defense hold up against a preseason All-American in Jaden Ott? Is a bounce back in the cards for Syracuse football? Well, it's time to answer these questions. From coast to coast, from Cuse to Cal, the countdown's got it all, and it starts right now.
Welcome one, welcome all inside our CitrusTV studios for this edition of Cuse Countdown. Alongside Tyler Aitken and Nick Waley, I'm Srikar, Rajendran. Syracuse takes on Cal in the first matchup between these two as ACC foes. Now, as the season goes on, the stakes get higher and higher, and SU certainly has not adjusted to those stakes increasing. Tyler, were we in for a letdown game with Boston College in that back-breaking 37-31 loss after a thrilling overtime win against Virginia Tech?
I mean, you could certainly argue that Syracuse wasn't a spot for that to happen, but at this point, any hopes of the ACC title game, the playoffs, which were already slim before the Boston College game, those are gone. But there's still a lot to play for Syracuse. You can still end the year as a ranked team. You can still get to 10 wins with winning out and getting a bowl victory. Kyle McCord said this week when speaking to the media, there's still a lot to play for. And so, yes, the season is over if all you care about is the playoffs, but Syracuse fans should care about a heck of a lot more than that.
Realistically, though, I'm just worried about the next few games. Where's the consistency from this team? Giving up over 250 rushing yards in back-to-back games against Virginia Tech, and a game that Syracuse came back to win. It looked like the momentum was finally turning their way, and then again, sloppy mistakes on the defensive end and on offense for Syracuse. It's just disappointing to me that this team can go from such a high to such a low.
Hey, Nick, you were getting around to mentioning it, but if you're looking for a culprit in this SU loss, well, look no further than the run defense. Boston College racked up nearly 300 yards on the ground. I mean, if you don't stop the run, you let the other team dictate the pace of the game, and BC certainly did that, Nick, in this one.
I mean, Syracuse has the third worst rush defense in the ACC, and I think it looked like it wasn't that big of an issue over the last few weeks before the Virginia Tech game, but all of a sudden it just seems like the O-line once again starts to let Syracuse down. Defensively as well, the D-line, like Coach Brown said, they just haven't been physical enough. It's only the second time this season they've allowed a player over 100 yards rushing against BC, and they had two players on that occasion. This team just needs to figure it out defensively on the rush game.
Well, some things never change, and this comes from recruiting because Dino Babers, Syracuse's former coach, always had undersized defenses, especially the defensive line. And you see every year there's a game where Syracuse allows at least 250 yards. That hasn't had an opportunity to change yet because Fran Brown doesn't have a team that he's fully recruited there. He needs to get bigger bodies to permanently fix this because you can see Syracuse having an undersized defensive line, having undersized linebackers was a problem that Dino Babers started. It showed with the run defense at least once a season, and it's kept up with Fran Brown. He has a chance to fix that with recruiting. He has a chance to solve the problems that Dino Babers started, but he needs to do it with recruiting. You can't fix that within the season.
Well, usually in a loss, you'll have quite a bit of mistakes, and that certainly rang true for SU in this one. LaQuinn Allen, Kyle McCord, and Jackson Meeks all fumbled, not to mention 10 penalties. Tyler, when you do that in a game, that is a large uphill battle you have to climb to win.
It is, and not to keep bringing up the former coach for Syracuse football, but Dino Babers was in charge for 8 years, and in all 8 of those years, Syracuse was in the top half of penalized teams in the country. Fran Brown comes in, and his whole thing is dart. Detailed, accountable. You can't say dart over and over again. You can't claim your team practices dart when you get penalized as much as this Orange team has been, and it's gotten worse and worse throughout this season. It's unacceptable. It gives free opportunities to the other teams, and it's not what Syracuse claims to be about.
It's just careless. This is a team that has to be ready to make good plays, and you cannot compete at any level in the FBS if you keep making mistakes. There were so many expectations for this team. You got Kyle McCord coming in. You have some really good recruits, especially at wide receiver, and all of a sudden it just gets thrown away because of careless penalties. Really disappointing, and hopefully it could be fixed long term.
Well, one guy that didn't make a whole lot of mistakes, fumble aside, was Kyle McCord. Nearly 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. So, Nick, he balls out. But how do you feel about what he's been doing over the past few games, especially when we look at how he started the season?
I mean, he's been the Kyle McCord we really expected to come. We expected him to come to Syracuse. You're going to throw the ball, but he's done it even more than even I expected, averaging over 350 yards per game. Syracuse only averages about 353 yards per game in total yards. He's just had a really tough go of it because of the O-line in front of him. He's just not given enough time in the pocket. He has been good. He had his career high against BC, 392 passing yards. He's been sacked 20 times this year already, only 16 last season.
Well, the thing with Kyle McCord is that after the year, he's going to have broken a ton of records, and Syracuse fans are going to start to talk about, all right, where does he stack up in the history of Syracuse quarterbacks? And what I think he's proven in the last few games is that his average game is better than any other Syracuse quarterback ever's average game. He has a very low floor. You saw that with 5 interceptions thrown against Pittsburgh. He also has a pretty high ceiling. Now, you could argue that he's no Donovan McNabb, but at the very least, an average game from Kyle McCord is better than anyone has ever put up in Syracuse football history, and you gotta give him credit for that.
I can't even disagree with that. He has been that guy. He has been excellent, and it's just been the rest of the team around him.
So we talk about McCord, we talk about the rest of this offense. Let's talk about the head man in charge, Fran Brown, what he's been doing this season. Feeling a little bit apologetic about a coaching decision he made in-game after that loss to BC. Let's take a listen.
I was trying to make different calls and tell him different things, so I just messed up on stuff. I kind of went against his judgment, so everything that happened out there was mainly my fault, and I got to be able to tell him different things.
So that's been a frequent quote from Fran Brown this season. But Tyler, is it apologetic or is it being guilty of something? If you say it that many times, is it really holding yourself accountable?
It does feel guilty to me, because here's the thing. After the loss to Stanford, Fran Brown said, hey, look, it's on me. I was the one that had the defensive play call that led up the first down to Stanford that lost the game. Then, in the Pittsburgh loss, he says, oh, I didn't prepare the team well enough. Then, after the loss to Boston College, he said, hey, I overruled the defensive coordinator. I overruled Elijah Robinson. I told him what not to do. And so all 3 of the losses you're saying are on you, which is fine if that's true, and maybe it is true. But you're saying you personally lost this team 3 games this year? That's unacceptable, even if it's the first time you've ever been a head coach.
It does worry me, though, that if there's so much stopping and just interfering with certain plays, what is that communication like between him and his coordinators? That's something that's definitely a concern, not just this season, but long term.
Well, speaking of interesting quotes from Fran Brown, he had quite the special one after that game against Boston College. Let's take another listen here.
Honestly, I got a ritual. When we lose, I ain't even getting a shower till early this morning. I just be mad. I just brush my teeth. But it's I don't deserve soap. I don't deserve to do all that. I'm just focused on trying to get back and trying to make sure that our players mentally understand and know that I let them down, that they didn't do it. So just being able to talk to them.
Nick, any thoughts about that ritual that Fran Brown has going on?
I would prefer if he took showers after games.
I'm sure Mrs. Brown would as well. That's what he went on to say. That's what Kyle McCord actually said. He said he wants to actually win out the rest of the season for Mrs. Brown, so her husband doesn't have to go any weekends without showering for the rest of the year. I thought that was a great response by Kyle.
Well, no matter what you may think, there's still a whole other team waiting on the West Coast. And when we come back, we're going to be breaking down Cal, what matchups they could pose to this SU offense and defense. All that and more coming up on the Countdown. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. That's Tyler Aitken, that's Nick Waley, I'm Srikar Rajendran. Breaking down a new ACC team, Cal, who's had a bit of a tumultuous season in their new conference. They win their first 3, then they drop 4 in a row, and now back-to-back wins, Tyler. It's been a little bit of a rough transition.
It has been a rough transition, you could say, but I would disagree with you because if you look at those 4 losses in a row against good teams like Miami and, well, Florida State was supposed to be a good team before the year, all 1-score losses. And if you look at how the record is going to turn out, it might be even better than last year, even with all the travel that this team has done. You look at the map of their travel, it looks like there's squiggles all over the place. They've touched pretty much every state on the East Coast, and they're from the West Coast.
I'll give you an interesting stat in terms of the travel. They've traveled 17,766 miles. That's 71.3% of the circumference of the earth, and they still have 1 more away game to go down in Dallas against SMU. They lost their 4 games by combined score of 9. This team is good. They arguably got robbed against Miami. I think this is a really good Cal team.
Well, we talked at length about the guy under center for SU, who's Kyle McCord, obviously. But on the other side, Fernando Mendoza for Cal, around 2,500 yards, which is good for 4th in the conference. Nick, how good has this guy been this season?
He seems like he's just getting better and better with every game that goes on. And it's just a few things for me. Number 1, he is also mobile in the pocket and is able to be dynamic in the pocket. When he does get a little bit of pressure, he's able to wiggle out really, really well. Can get on the run. He's also just been really efficient throwing the ball. Just 4 interceptions on the season, tied for best in the ACC with 9 games played, only with Cade Klubnik. 69% completion rate as well, 2nd in the ACC. All-around efficient quarterback.
Yeah, the key for him against Syracuse is just going to be limiting any egregious mistakes. He only has 4 interceptions on the year compared to Kyle McCord's 12. If he can play a clean game and let the defense do the work, then I don't think there's going to be much of a problem for him. He just needs to keep it simple. 14 passing touchdowns on the year, 2,500 passing yards. It's pretty good. It's not amazing. It's just solid, and that's going to be his role against Syracuse.
Shifting focus here from the pass game to the ground game for Cal. It's been a pretty interesting season for the running back duo of Jaden Ott and Javian Thomas, and I think it's best that we explain both of these running backs' journeys in depth. Follow me. So Cal does have a nice pass game to boast, but the run game has needed to find its footing this year. Preseason All-American Jaden Ott has been in and out of the lineup due to injury, but let's go back to last year. I mean, this guy was on fire, 1,300 rush yards, and showed truly how explosive he was. And this year was supposed to be a big one because it could have been one where Ott develops his abilities even more, but the injury bug did strike, and the junior hasn't found as much consistency. But in his stead, it's been Javian Thomas toting the rock. It's been a bit of a rough go, but the sophomore did have a big game against San Diego State with 170 yards rushing. So with both Thomas and Ott expected to be a full go in this one, look, Syracuse cannot be caught napping, Tyler.
Well, Srikar, the last guy you'd want to get caught napping against is the preseason All-ACC first-team running back in Jaden Ott. He had 1,300 rushing yards last year, came into this year, and he has under 200 rushing yards so far. That's been a little bit because of injury, a little bit because of pure inefficiency. But if you look at what he's done at times, what he's flashed, he still has the same ability that led him to 1,300 rushing yards last season. Had 2 touchdowns against UC Davis in the first game of the season. And now that he's feeling healthy again, he's going to be flashing that kind of agility again. Getting to the outside of the defense, using his speed to just beat defenders from there. And hey, I get it, under 200 rushing yards, not good. But how about the receiving game? That's another option for Jaden Ott. Over 60 yards to the house. You are one of the best running backs in the country, Jaden Ott, when it comes to pure talent. You have an opportunity to have your first breakout game of the year, get back to last year's form against Syracuse's run defense, which has been pretty pathetic the past few weeks.
I can't disagree with you. Jaden Ott, he's been that guy. We've seen him. He has done it. But this year, he hasn't been that guy. To me, Javian Thomas has had an amazing season coming out and filling in for Ott. And if both of them can stay healthy, it could be an incredible 1-2 tandem. And for me, it's a couple couple intangibles. Number one for Thomas, it's his lightning quick speed. Look at him go 50 yards to the house against NC State. If you give him any kind of gap, any kind of room, he's going to fill it, and the secondary cannot keep up. The second one for me is just that toughness, that ability to break through the tackle. I slowed it down a little bit. He's able to break not one, not two, but then 3 tackles to get into the end zone, his second touchdown of the day against the Wolfpack, and against a Syracuse rush defense that's really struggled as of late. This could be quite a feasting for this Golden Bears running back room.
SU allowed 2 Boston College running backs to pass the century mark last weekend. Maybe the same is in store this week, Srikar.
Well, it very well could be. If Kai Robichaux is going crazy on your defense, then Jaden Ott, Javian Thomas, both definitely have that explosive ability as well, and both of them could be factors here. Obviously, the production doesn't look as great, but both of these guys can go at any time. Syracuse has to be kept on their toes in this one. But flipping sides here, going from the offense to the defense, the pass rush for Cal has been on top of their game. Top 15 in the NCAA in sacks per game. Xavier Carlton specifically has 9 sacks on the year. We've seen how this SU O-line has performed. Nick, do you think that Cal pass rush can overwhelm SU?
I absolutely think they can. This looks like an incredible defense. It's a Cal defense. We've talked how good that offense could possibly be. The defense is twice as good. They are top 15 in the NCAA set for sacks per game, top 20 defense in the country. We talked about Xavier Carlton, tied 3rd in the ACC for sacks, 9th in the NCAA. It's just flowing with talent, and it's also a game changer. 7 sacks against Wake, 6 against NC State. It's what can put this team over the top in these games.
I mean, Nick, Syracuse's offensive line was feeble against Boston College, allowed 4 sacks, and even beyond that, Kyle McCord was running for his life back there. It looked like he was in a washing machine. Xavier Carlton is going to eat. That doesn't mean Cal is going to win, but at the very least, McCord is going to have to do some work with his legs to have a chance, to give Syracuse a chance in this game.
Well, we mentioned how good that pass rush is, but the crazy part, the secondary might be even better. I mean, this team leads the nation in interceptions this season. So Tyler, Kyle McCord threw 5 picks against Pitt. I think both of us could assume he could be in some hot water here.
Well, absolutely. Against good defenses, he seems to get a little finicky in the pocket. 5 interceptions against Pittsburgh. Now you play a team that leads the country with 17 interceptions on the year. You have talented players in the secondary like Noel Williams with 7 picks alone. He's going to get tempted to take some shots down the field. If he puts up a 50-50 ball, it's going to feel more like a 60-40 ball in favor of the Bears.
And it's just an efficient unit overall. 9 guys with at least a pick, 3 with 2 or more. And when you have a pass rush that is so efficient, that means the quarterback's going to throw quick. And you know Kyle McCord is going to be frantic, like you mentioned, Tyler. That means there's going to be more opportunities for the likes of Noel Williams to just feast on those balls coming in towards the secondary. And I think it might be a long night for Mr. McCord.
You know, I usually don't get this feeling, but I've adjusted to my seat so perfectly that I don't feel like I can get up. But I must do what needs to be done. You two are coming with me. When we come back on Cuse Countdown, we're going to the wall and we're going to figure out some burner accounts. Stick with us. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown in a different setting. Tyler Aitken, Nick Waley, I'm Srikar Rajendran. We're going to be playing a game of Who's Burner. All right, now how this works, I don't know if you guys are on social media that much. I know I am quite a bit. A lot of athletes may tend to get burner accounts, but our production team has come up with some burner account tweets. And your guys' job is to be detectives here. Be like Sherlock Holmes, be a sleuth. and figure out where we can trace that burner account to, or where we could trace that tweet to. So let's look at our first tweet here. Obviously there's a lot of things that could be said about this program, but Bino Dabers is on the clock here. This dude McCord isn't giving me the ball enough. Let me have my moment. Tyler, who could this be?
Now, I know he gets the ball quite a bit, but I am going with Kyle McCord. Not Kyle McCord. I'm saying Kyle McCord. Sorry, should throw it more to Oronde Gadsden. Now, I get it. He's double teamed in pretty much every single game, but I will say it until I'm red in the face. I might say it until I'm maroon in the face. Oronde Gadsden should be getting the ball more than 4 times a game. But he has 4 games this year where he has under 4 receptions and under 40 yards. He's one of the most talented tight ends in the entire country. It is unacceptable. He isn't getting the ball more. I don't care if he's double teamed. I don't care if he's triple teamed. Give him at least a chance to catch the ball. Come on, Kyle.
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that was Oronde's account. But for me, the guy who has been so efficient when he has gotten the ball, especially as a receiving back, that's LaQuint Allen. He has been that X factor for Syracuse on offense, especially when Kyle McCord has thrown it laterally. When LaQuint Allen has been given that little bit of room, he has been able to feast on it. He's the 4th, at least ranked 4th in terms of receivers on this Syracuse team. 3 touchdowns out of the backfield as well. And he comes up in those clutch moments. We saw it against UNLV. We saw it against Virginia Tech. I want to see LaQuint Allen get thrown the ball more laterally.
Well, we go on to our next tweet here. It has to do with Fran Brown, all right? Now, we have a guy who says that Fran Brown is not giving me enough playing time. Nick, who could this be? Because there's maybe quite a few guys circling in my mind.
That was what I was thinking as well. Like, it could be any kind of the receiving core. It could be the likes of Jackson Meeks. Could be Amari Hatcher. Could even be LaQuint Allen again. It could be Oronde Gadsden. But for me, the guy who's coming back from history, Justice Ross Simmons. You know him from the Virginia Tech game. Had a complete breakout for Syracuse. Came back from injury and had 2 touchdowns against the Hokies. Had 88 yards receiving, was able to get the comeback going for Syracuse on the day. I want to see him get involved more. Only 2 receptions against BC. Obviously, he was going to get a little bit more attention than he did against the Hokies, but I want him to be more involved in the receiving core.
I think that's a totally fair answer. I'm going to go with someone who you would never imagine would actually say this, because he's such a great guy. He's a good leader. He's a great player too, but it's Derek McDonald, one of Syracuse's starting linebackers over the past few seasons. But ever since Justin Barron moved into a real linebacker role instead of playing rover, star, whatever you want to call the position he was playing, well, all of a sudden now McDonald is 3rd or 4th fiddle, not just 2nd fiddle at the linebacker's position to Marlowe Wax, because you got Marlowe Wax, you got Justin Barron playing linebacker, then on some plays you've got Fadil Diggs moving back to linebacker, and so all of a sudden you have one of the best tacklers on the team only on the field on some plays. He's been playing more special teams at times than actual linebacker. That's totally unacceptable, and he's a great guy. He would never say this with his name attached to it. But I don't know, maybe through the burner account, he's finally letting loose a little bit, and he would be totally deserved. He'd be totally in the right to say that.
They look like they need him at the moment in particular, so I could definitely see that for sure.
All right, fellas, for this final tweet, I want all of our arms to go in right here, right in the center. Cancun on 3. 1, 2, 3. Cancun. That is what Cuse Candy Shop has tweeted out. Few more games, and he's out of here. Tyler, who could this be?
Well, it's going to be another guy who's a good leader, Kyle McCord. Now, I get it. He picked Syracuse. He could have gone to a lot of good schools in the country, but he chose to come to Syracuse because of Fran Brown. They have a great coach-player relationship. It feels like they're canoodling at times because they get along so well, but Kyle McCord is an NFL-caliber quarterback. He came to Syracuse to win, to maybe go to the playoffs, to lead a team to the playoffs that might not belong to be there, and unsurprisingly, Syracuse is not going to go to the playoffs. He's saying all the right things. He's not going to give up on this team, but you can't tell me in the back of his head he's not like, well, maybe it would be nice to just move on, get to the NFL already. McCord's a great guy. He's saying the right things, like I mentioned. But in the back of his mind, you already know this guy wants to be in the league now.
I'll tell you who definitely is ready to go to the draft. And it's probably the best prospect on this Syracuse team. Kyle McCord is probably a quarterback ready to go to the NFL. But it's Oronde Gasson, the most athletic guy, the guy who was just destined to go to the NFL since he broke out on the scene in 2022 for Syracuse. This is a guy who is just destined to be a second or maybe even third round pick. He is, of course, in that middle ground between wide receiver and tight end, but he's just such an athletic specimen that he's just going to have, I think he's going to have a fantastic combine and is going to be a fantastic player in the NFL. And it's just, he's been having such a tough season because, like we mentioned earlier, he's just in double coverage the entire time. Can't really move, isn't really given the same opportunities, and McCord has had a tough time being able to get the ball to him. So Oronde Gasson, I think, is ready to go.
You know, beach football is a whole lot of fun, and now next time I'm in Cancun, I know I can get Kyle and Oronde on my team. I'm going to recruit him like Fran Brown did. But fellas, you know, we look at all these tweets, we look at all these burner messages. You wouldn't think from the start of the season it'd end up this way.
I don't think you would. It's been interesting, especially the likes of Oronde Gasson, who just hasn't been able to have that same kind of year that we expected.
No, I mean, Oronde is a great player. Coming back from a Liz Frank injury is pretty hard to do, but both of those guys still NFL bound.
Well, stick with us. When we come back, we're heading back to the desk, and we'll be looking big picture. Take a look around the ACC, and then we'll give you our predictions for this game. Stay tuned.
If you're buzzed and doing this, to make yourself feel okay to drive,
CWX.
you're not okay to drive.
YGKLVW. Regular.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown one final time. That's Tyler Aitken, that's Nick Waley, and I'm Srikar Rajendran. A little bit of time here on Cuse Countdown, but it's a pretty momentous time in the ACC. Teams are traveling to the West Coast now. And Tyler, where are we seeing the ramifications of that? How has it changed from year to year when you add, more teams to the ACC and more travel especially?
Well, the ACC used to be one of the easiest conferences to travel in with so much revolving around North and South Carolina. But now you have the 3 West Coast teams traveling a ton, and then some teams having to go way out west, and then other teams not having to go way out west. But Clemson, Miami, Louisville, a lot of the same names standing at the top of the standings. The ACC table is always just so fossilized. You always have those powers up there, except SMU. How about the newcomers from Texas?
I mean, they have really shown that they could be a force and probably will be a force. And my prediction that they're probably going to make the college football playoffs because they just have BC at home, at UVA, and Cal to end the year. Cal probably the hardest of those 3. I could totally see SMU winning out the rest of the way, playing likely Clemson, I would say, in the ACC title game because Miami losing to Georgia Tech, that puts them now into 3rd on head-to-head and on the tiebreaker. Look, could get really interesting down the stretch.
Well, Nick, before we head out, let's get your prediction for this game. Cal and Syracuse, we've broken down the entire game for you. Who do you got in this one?
Look, I think this is a Cal team that's just getting better and better, whereas Syracuse is kind of getting good to bad again. I think this is going to be a Cal win. 27-21, the final over in Berkeley. I think the Syracuse team, it just isn't working out for them, and this Cal team is looking better with every week. Both defensively look like one of the best defensive teams in the country, and also on offense, just so solid all around. Could be a struggle for the Cuse.
Well, Nick, I'll give you one thing. I would be absolutely flabbergasted if Syracuse didn't give up 200 rushing yards. But at the end of the day, if it ends up being a scoring duel at the end between Kyle McCord and Cal. He's taking them up on his own. I'm going with Cal McCord, 27-26. Syracuse gets the win.
I like that number 27. I'm going to go 27-23 Cal in this one. We want to thank you for tuning in to the show. For Tyler, Nick, and myself, I want to say so long, and we hope you enjoy the game wherever it may be. We'll see you next time on The Countdown.